Am I going crazy, or is there a mimic in my house? Have you ever heard the voice of someone you knew wasn't there? Or worse, someone who hadn't been alive there for a very, very long time? I used to think I was a rational person. I didn't believe in ghosts or the kind of supernatural whispers people usually pass around during power outages. I grew up in a regular working-class family, in a small town out west in the United States. No one in my family ever spoke about ghosts or hauntings. We didn't live in some old, creaky Gothic house. There wasn't a graveyard behind the backyard. It was just a two-story home like any other, warm, peaceful, filled with laughter. But then one day, that voice, that familiar voice, my mother's voice, called my name from downstairs. The thing is, I was home alone, and her phone's location app said she was 8 miles away, eating at a Mexican restaurant. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me. I thought so too. But that was only the beginning. What I'm about to share with you is a story I've never told anywhere else. A story that unfolded over months, starting from faint whispers in the dark, until the day I heard my cousin's voice, who had moved away a year earlier, say my name, right in the middle of my own bedroom. You might not believe me. My mother didn't either. But if you've ever woken up at 3 a.m. with the eerie feeling that someone is standing at the end of the hallway, just staring, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand. This is my story, and maybe it's yours too. When my stepfather was transferred to a new position in Flagstaff, Arizona, our whole family had to move into a new house. My mom, my 2 older brothers, him, and me, we were all starting a new chapter together. The house sat quietly at the edge of a pine forest, where, in the early mornings, the mist would slip through the window cracks like silent shadows. It was a 2-story house, painted a creamy white, with red roof tiles and a tiny backyard that stray cats often wandered into. Sounds pretty normal, right? Maybe even kind of charming. Upstairs was the heart of the house, the kitchen, the living room, the dining area, and my bedroom, tucked away at the end of a long hallway across from my parents' room. Downstairs, which was always a bit colder and damp in the mornings, was where my 2 brothers stayed. And there was a guest room, too. That room used to belong to Charlie, my closest cousin. He had lived with us all last summer before moving out of state for school. When we first moved in, I felt like the house was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, like a breezy summer afternoon, but the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're disturbing something invisible but present, always lingering in the shadows. I didn't say anything. Maybe it was just because everything was new. Everyone says that when they first move into a house, but I remember it clearly. That first night in my new room, I woke up in the middle of the night to a faint creaking sound, like footsteps, slow and careful, right outside in the hallway. I turned on my nightlight. Nothing there. Of course, I told myself. Old house, wooden floors creak, that's normal. But the strange thing was, the very next morning, my brother asked, "You weren't walking around in the hallway last night, were you?" I froze, then laughed it off. Just a coincidence, I told myself. But if you've ever woken up at 3 a.m. with the feeling that someone is watching from the end of the hallway, then you know that feeling isn't a coincidence. I started paying more attention to the layout of the house, not in an interior design kind of way, but in that quiet, cautious way, like I needed to memorize every corner, every sound, every breath of that house, just to survive. The house was shaped like a slanted L. Upstairs had the kitchen, living room, a small bathroom, and 3 bedrooms. My room was isolated at the very end of the hall, the blind spot of the house, where daylight rarely reached. There was just one old ceiling light with a dim yellow bulb that flickered every time strong winds blew. My door faced my parents' door, but the hallway connecting the two always gave me chills, even just walking by late at night to grab a glass of water. Downstairs was the garage, the laundry room, and 2 more bedrooms. One belonged to my brother, who was almost never home, and the other was the guest room. The same room where Charlie, my closest cousin, had slept through all of last summer. Charlie had moved out. But the room stayed. Door shut tight, always colder than the rest of the house, and no one used it anymore. There was one thing I realized after a few weeks of living there. The strange sounds always came from downstairs. Footsteps, soft knocking, cabinet doors shutting. It all started from the area near Charlie's room. I once asked my mom, "Is this house not well insulated? I keep hearing weird noises downstairs." She laughed. "You're imagining things again. This house is solid, probably just mice." But you know what? I listened. I remembered where every sound came from, and they didn't move like mice. Mice scurry. But these sounds, they had rhythm, like human footsteps, slow, intentional, as if something down there was getting familiar with our home, bit by bit, day by day. I hadn't told anyone about this, partly out of fear, partly because no one would have believed me anyway. Until the night, I heard my mother's voice call my name from downstairs, even though she was having dinner somewhere else. It was a Saturday. The whole family went out for dinner. I stayed behind because I was tired and just wanted to be alone. I remember it was around 7:20 p.m. I was lying on my bed, phone resting on my stomach, FaceTiming with Charlie, my cousin. We were talking about an upcoming video game release. My cat, Luna, was lazily curled up at the foot of the bed, her tail twitching softly with every breath. Everything was normal, until I heard my mom's voice, clear, coming from downstairs. "Ethan, sweetie." Her voice, gentle, soft, just like always, echoed from the hallway that led to the stairs. I sat straight up. I know my mom's voice. There's no mistaking it. "Charlie, hang on. I think my mom just got back," I said into the phone. I walked to my door and looked down the hallway. Pitch dark. The hallway light above was still flickering faintly. No one was there. I felt a bit shaken, but thought, maybe I just didn't hear her come in. Maybe she used the back door downstairs, the one that leads to the fenced backyard. That door's almost never used. Then I remembered. She was out to dinner. I picked up my phone and opened Family Track, the app my family uses to share real-time locations. My mom, stepdad, and both my brothers, they were all still at the restaurant, nearly 10 kilometers away. Their location dots hadn't moved. I stood there frozen. My heartbeat started to race. Then I called out toward the stairs. "Mom?" No answer. Only Luna, my cat, sprang up and hissed, a sound I had never heard from her before. I shut my bedroom door, locked it, sat down with my back to the wall, phone shaking a little in my hand. Charlie was still on the line. "What's going on? You look pale." I shook my head. I didn't know how to explain it. I had heard my mom's voice, but she wasn't home. Luna never hisses like that, unless there's a stranger. But we didn't have a stranger, did we? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every gust of wind against the glass felt like a whisper. I didn't tell anyone about it, not until the next day. And when I did tell my mom, she laughed. "You're trying to scare your little brother, huh? Halloween's coming up," she said. But I didn't laugh, and I wasn't trying to scare anyone. And from that moment on, everything started to change. I no longer trusted the quiet in that house. I began watching more carefully, noticing the silence, the lag between sound and response. I also started relying on things that seemed trivial, like the Family Track app. That app, was something my mom had installed on all our phones. We used it to know who was where, like if Dad was at work or Mom was picking someone up, or if I'd gotten home yet. It was simple, lightweight, and eerily accurate. So when I saw that everyone was still at the restaurant that night, and yet I heard my mom's voice downstairs, I knew there were only two possibilities. The app glitched, or that voice wasn't my mom's. I checked every setting on the app, the location history, travel speeds. There wasn't a single sign of anything off. My mom had not left that restaurant at any point in that time frame. So then, what did I hear? I started digging, reading Reddit threads, forums about something called audio mimicry, the phenomenon where a familiar voice is perfectly imitated. Some people said they heard their child call "Mom" in the middle of the night, while the child was sound asleep in another house. Others said they heard their spouse asking them to open the door, only to see on their security camera that there was no one there. A lot of the stories had something in common. The mimic always used the voice of the person you trusted most, and it always showed up in a place where no one should be. I decided to enable real-time alerts on Family Track. From then on, every time I heard a strange noise, I'd check right away to see who was home and who wasn't. And I started noticing it wasn't just once. Many more times after that, I heard sounds or voices, while the app showed very clearly no one else was home but me. Once it was the sound of a chair dragging across the floor downstairs while I was studying. Another time, it was my brother's voice calling, "Ethan!" from the staircase. Though he was spending the night in his dorm, I stopped telling anyone.
I was scared, but deep down, I wanted to understand what it was. Things seemed to quiet down for a while. Until one Sunday morning, my mom was gardening, my stepdad was cutting wood out front, and I had just stepped out of the living room when that voice returned. But this time, it wasn't my mother's.
I remember it clearly. The sunlight was soft that day, and the window was cracked open just enough to let in the fresh air. I was about to make coffee when that voice called out from the end of the upstairs hallway, right where my bedroom was. "Hey, Ethan, come here for a sec." The voice, it was Charlie's. Charlie, my cousin who had lived with us all last summer. He'd moved out nearly a year ago. We still kept in touch, but Charlie hadn't been back to my house since he left. I froze. That was Charlie's voice. No mistake. The way he called me, the rhythm of it. That soft nasal tone only he had. But the problem was, I was home alone. I turned around, staring straight down the hallway that led to my room, the place that voice had come from. No footsteps, no movement, just a heavy, suffocating silence pressing into the air. Luna, my cat, was sitting on the couch at the time. She turned her head toward the hallway before I did. She let out a low hiss, then bolted off the couch and dove under the table. I had never seen her react like that. Not to a voice she should have recognized. I took a step back, my heart beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I didn't call back. I didn't go check. I just stood there, frozen like stone. I thought, if I moved forward, something might be waiting in my room. Not Charlie, not anyone from my family, but something, pretending to be someone I used to love. When my mom came home about 15 minutes later, I told her what happened. I was shaking so badly I couldn't even pour myself a glass of water, and she laughed. A soft laugh, but this time it didn't make me feel safe. "You've got too much imagination? Next time I'm banning you from reading Reddit at night," she said. I nodded, but I didn't feel any calmer inside. This time, it wasn't some unfamiliar voice. It called me in the voice of someone I loved, matching every detail, but in a place that was wrong, at a time that should have been impossible. I started to wonder, was something learning to mimic? Listening, watching, choosing the right moment, when I was most off guard. It wasn't just sounds anymore, not just shadows. Now, it was using people I cared about to get close. But then, everything went quiet. The weeks that followed, even months, there was nothing strange. No more voices, no more footsteps echoing in the middle of the night. No more moments where my cat crawled under the table like she'd seen something I couldn't. At first, I stayed alert. I slept with the nightlight on, kept my door locked. My phone stayed right next to my pillow with the Family Track app open. But then again, we're human. We get used to everything, even fear. Gradually, I stopped locking my door at night. I turned off the nightlight. I started thinking, maybe it was just my mind under too much stress. One afternoon in April, I was sitting in the living room watching a movie. My parents were outside. Mom was mowing the lawn. Dad was trimming branches. The door to the garage was slightly open, which was normal. We often left it cracked to let the air in. I turned down the volume a bit, just enough so I could hear if Dad called from outside. And then I heard a familiar voice from the stairwell downstairs.
It didn't call my name, just muttered a single line. It's about time. Short, very short, but clear, with full inflection, with breath behind it.
I stood up, walked slowly toward the top of the stairs. There was no one there. I looked through the glass door. Dad was still out in the yard, working. Nothing was out of place. So, I didn't say anything to anyone. I went back to the couch, turned the TV up a bit louder, like that could fill the emptiness that had just opened in my chest. From that moment on, I started to understand one thing. Whatever was in my house, it knew I was letting my guard down, and it was waiting. It was learning to be more patient than me. And then, on a quiet afternoon like any other, it spoke again. The second time. But not from downstairs, not from the hallway. This time, it called me from inside my own bedroom. I was sitting in the living room, just a short distance from my bedroom door. The door was ajar, just enough for me to see inside, empty, silent, no lights on. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard, "Ethan, hey, come here for a sec." I froze. It was Charlie's voice, but this time, it was different. The voice didn't echo from afar like before, didn't sound like it was drifting through fog. It was clear, close, as if Charlie were standing right in the middle of my room, looking straight at me, calling me. I looked into the room, empty. No sound, no movement. Just a feeling. A feeling you only understand if you've ever stepped into a place that used to be yours, and immediately sensed that it no longer is. I didn't respond, didn't go in, I just stared, then gently closed the door. The door shut without a sound. But inside, I heard a whisper. Not full words, just something carried by the air, like wind through a crack. "I'll try again later." I'll try again. That night, I didn't sleep in my room. I laid out a mattress on the living room floor, holding Luna, my cat, who had grown unusually quiet since the earlier incidents. She didn't hiss anymore, didn't hide. She just curled up next to me, like both of us knew that room wasn't safe anymore. The next day, I cleaned the room. I flipped the mattress, wiped down every corner, opened all the windows to let the sunlight pour in. But you know what? The sunlight in my room always felt dimmer than anywhere else in the house, like it had to pass through something before it could reach me. From that day on, I never left my door open when I was alone. I stopped calling Charlie. I wasn't even sure if the voice I'd heard on the phone and the one coming from my bedroom were even from the same person. I think if you've never truly experienced overwhelming fear, you probably imagine it like in the movies. Screaming, running, slamming doors, flailing around. But the truth is, it's nothing like that. When you're face to face with something beyond your understanding, beyond logic, your body doesn't react the way it does in the movies. It freezes, locks up, like every muscle, every nerve ending knows that any movement could give you away. I remember one time, one of the worst. Around 2 a.m., I woke up thirsty. I didn't dare turn on the lights. I tiptoed to the door, planning to head to the kitchen for a bottle of water. And the moment I cracked the door open, I saw a shadow cast by the bathroom light at the end of the hall. Not moving. No sound. Just a dim silhouette pressed against the frosted bathroom glass, as if watching the hallway, as if waiting for me. I didn't scream. I didn't breathe loudly. I just stood there, barefoot on the cold tile, hand frozen on the doorknob. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 20 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. Until the shadow disappeared. No footsteps. No door closing. Nothing at all, like it had never been there. Just me, heart pounding to the point of suffocation, and hands cold as ice. The next morning, I checked the bathroom. The light was off. No one had used it all week. I told a friend online about it, someone who collects real-life paranormal reports. He only sent me one sentence in reply. That thing is watching how you react. It wants to know when you're completely helpless. I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but from that point forward, I started to understand. Fear doesn't live in the sound itself. It lives in the waiting. The stillness, That moment when you realize you no longer have control over what's happening. And the worst part wasn't the presence of it was the doubt. I started doubting myself. Maybe I imagined everything. Maybe it was stress, sleep deprivation, too many creepy videos online. I even started wondering, maybe I was developing some form of mild paranoia. I read up on something called pareidolia, when the brain tries to make sense of random stimuli by turning them into familiar shapes or sounds. Maybe I had assigned too much meaning to harmless noises in the house. Maybe the voices I heard were just echoes in my own mind. But then, there were the small details I couldn't quite ignore. Like one time, I set up my phone to record a time-lapse video, pointing down the hallway from the living room, just to see if I really was losing it. When I played the video back 2 hours later, near the very end of the clip, I saw my bedroom door slowly creak open, just a bit, and then gently shut itself again. No one was home, no wind. And that door, normally, was hard to close without using your hand. I repeated the experiment over the next few days. Nothing happened. Everything was quiet. And then, the day I was going to delete the videos just to clear my mind, I paused at the 17-second mark of another clip. There was a shadow, gliding across the mirror in the hallway. No clear shape, but clear enough to know it wasn't me, and no one else had been in the house at that time. I felt like I was caught in a loop. See, doubt, deny, then see again. Over and over, day after day, living between two realities. One where everything made sense,
and one where none of the rules applied. I didn't know which was worse, the fact that something might really be here, or that no one believed me. No one saw it, too.
No one went through it with me. Maybe that feeling, being alone in your belief, was the scariest part of all. That's why I'm telling this story. Not to scare anyone, not to look for sympathy. I don't need you to believe me right away. I just hope, if you've ever experienced something similar, if you've ever heard a voice from where no one should be, if you've ever seen a shadow pass at the corner of your eye, only to turn and find nothing, that you'll understand, and you'll speak up. I stayed quiet for a long time, because I was afraid if I told anyone, they'd laugh. They'd judge me. Just like my mom laughed once, even though she had no idea I'd spent the whole night curled up on the living room floor, holding my cat, too afraid to close my eyes. But I realized, staying silent doesn't make the fear go away. It just makes the fear quiet, like you. So, if something like this has ever happened to you, if you've ever heard, seen, or felt something no one else could, speak up. Tell someone. Or, at the very least, write it down. Post it somewhere online. Tuck it away. Maybe someone like me will find it. Someone who thought they were the only one who felt this way. And sometimes, just one person listening is enough. I don't have all the answers to what happened. I don't know if it was a ghost, or something spiritual, or a glitch in the brain, or some broken piece of memory. But I know one thing for sure. I heard something I shouldn't have heard. I saw something no one else saw. And I felt a kind of fear that words will never quite describe. If something like this has happened to you, tell your story. Don't stay silent, because maybe, just maybe, you're not alone.